Zabner, District 90. Senator Dawn Driscoll of District 46 reported that she's out of town and unable to attend. And Representatives Heather Hora, District 92, and Brad Sherman, District 91, did not respond to our invitation. So we're going to start with 3-minute summaries from each of our legislators on recent legislative matters of interest to you individually, and we will start with Senator Wahls, who's also the minority leader in the Senate. So kick us off, Senator Wahls.
It is deeply embarrassing and shameful that Dawn Driscoll, Brad Sherman, and Heather Hora are not here, period. I mean, it is ridiculous that this is the third month in a row that they have avoided having a presence at these forums to answer questions from the public and from their constituents. And these are people who have the gall to get up and try to say that they need better representation, so we need to have districts for our county supervisors so we can listen to the people in different parts of the county. Where are they? It is an affront to democracy and basic decency that they have continued to avoid these forums to be asked and answer questions from the public. So that's my opening statement, first of all. Second of all, it has been a very, very difficult last month at the State House. The Republican agenda continues at breakneck speed. This past 2 weeks in particular, Republicans in the Senate moved several pieces of legislation targeting transgender children and teenagers that have, over the course of the past week, resulted in a huge amount of confusion, discomfort, anger in our schools that are going to make life much more difficult for kids and teenagers who are going through, I mean, adolescence is always difficult, and doubly so for those who are transgender. And so that is one piece of just really difficult legislation that we had to deal with. There is just this past week, we had a debate on the governor's even broader bill that is now in the House, and its future is there up in the air, that continues to restrict what can be taught or discussed in the classroom, continues to put teachers in the middle between parents and children, and continues to drive down the quality of educators that Iowa is going to be able to retain in our state or attract from other states. Republicans also put into place measures that are going to make it more expensive for us to operate our social safety net without actually rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. You know this because Republicans are currently in the process of trying to take our state taxpayer watchdog, Auditor Rob Sand, and put him in a kennel and throw away the key, right? That's what they're currently trying to do. So if they ever try to tell you that they're concerned with waste, fraud, and abuse, just ask them about that legislation. The one piece of good news that we have from the State House is that after years of trying to get this bill out of the Iowa Senate, we finally passed legislation that will require hands-free driving in Iowa, so folks are able to keep their eyes fully focused on the road and not on their mobile device. So we've sent that bill over to the House, and our hope is that it'll pass there and go down to the governor for her signature. That's all I got.
Great, thank you. Senator Weiner? Weiner.
So I would really echo what Senator Wahls said, particularly about showing up. Democracy is not a spectator sport, as I think Kieran's t-shirt shows you. It requires participation and willingness to come and talk to and confront the voters, but more importantly, to listen to them. And one thing I think that we are seeing over and over again at the State House is Republicans are not listening to their voters. They are not being responsive to their voters. And the question that we can pose is, why is that the case? People voted for them. Now we have people showing up at the Capitol, whether it's the dairy farmers or the folks who don't want eminent domain and all the rest, saying, listen to us. And for the most part, Republicans are not listening to them. So we can draw our own conclusions, but I hope the voters draw their conclusions. This is supposed to be a forum on the environment. We've seen very little that's positive pass. We had one bill that's arguably quite bad pass the Senate, and it's on to the House, where they're getting hundreds of emails, which is Senate File 516. The goal of it is to prevent more lands from being conserved and more trails from being built. But they used a way around it by saying, well, we really need to maintain what we have first. But we know what the goal is. So I hope the House does not pass it. We haven't heard virtually anything about the need to clean up our water and ways to clean up our water. There's a great spread in today's Gazette about that, a full page on PFAS and other issues that need to be dealt with in our water. And I would just highlight one more bill that I hope isn't, that I think is unlikely to go anywhere. I really wish Senator Driscoll were here today, because under the cover of a Senate study bill, she introduced a bill into the Senate that would really change the nature of the corn and soybean checkoff. And the folks who were on that subcommittee got a lot of emails saying, please don't do this. This is in order to help market our corn, market our soybeans. And this would completely change the nature of that. There are other funding methods for the other thing that she wanted it to go to, but it's essentially a bill that's sort of designed to oddly punish the corn and soybean growers from someone who represents a rural area. So I wish you were here to answer for that. And finally, we should not be hurting our kids. We should be helping our kids. We should be feeding our kids. We should be teaching our kids. We should be giving them all the tools they need to succeed in life. We should not be banning books. We should not be doing any of the things that Senate File 496 does. We should not be outing them. We should not be playing secret police. So we'll see what happens with 496 in the Senate as well. It has been a rough couple of weeks. We continue to fight, and thank you for backing us.
Representative Jacoby.
Well, thank you everyone for being here today. Usually I like to open up with something lighthearted because the topics are very serious. Maybe even my imitation of me guarding Caitlin Clark. But I will go to another University of Iowa sport, and that's with Spencer Lee. Excuses are for wussies. Excuses for not attending today's forum is for wussies. We traveled here to accommodate other people, and they should be here to answer your questions. The League of Women Voters, and thank you for holding the forum today, the League of Women Voters stands for one thing that I see every day: voting, encouraging people to vote. So one of the bills that we're looking at is one that would take us out of the compact for the Midwest. And the reason they gave was because it encourages people to vote. That is the reason that they want to withdraw from the compact. We also had a debate this week on the county form of government and elections. I have to tell you, everything we talked about when we cross-examined the bill manager points to Jim Crow laws. I asked them about why you do not want students to vote. He said because they're not involved in the community, that students aren't involved in their community. Sometimes you gotta believe them when they say it. So I look forward to your questions today, and thank you so much for making the trip to Hills.
Representative Nielsen.
Thank you. It sounded like someone in the audience has the same cough Dave has a lot, the bullshit one. Yeah, I know.
I'm not saying it, but I do love Animal House. It was a great movie.
It's very highly contagious. Yeah, I mean, is it on? Okay. Thank you for having us here and for putting on all of these as usual. This is a great opportunity for us elected officials to meet with the public that we represent. And it's very unfortunate that all of the people who represent Johnson County are not here today. And I don't think I need to say any more about how terrible that is. We all know it. It has been a really, really rough few weeks up in Des Moines. I very much appreciate all of the people who have reached out by email, and I did receive a very, very beautiful, nice card that a lot of you signed on my desk on a day where I needed it more than I would like to admit. So thank you to everyone who put that together. So much is going on up there that is just bad, and it's mean, and I don't know what to tell you. I am very, very glad to be up there serving with the people at this table. I think you all know that you have some of the fiercest, most compassionate, most intelligent people representing you, and it's really the only reason that that we're able to be up there is because of all of the wonderful people that we have around us, there in Des Moines and then also here at home. So I am a little bit, everything kind of hit me last night, and I'm a little bit out of sorts and a little bit emotional about the last couple weeks. So I will stop rambling and being all squishy, and let the others finish this up, and then I will be happy to answer your questions. But just thank you so much for your support.
Representative Levin.
Thank you, Barb. Thank you all for being here. I don't like to give Bobby Kaufman a lot of credit, but one of the things that kind of formed my idea of what government looks like, responsible government looks like in Iowa is, for the past 10 years, Bobby Kaufman has been a Johnson County legislator. Now with redistricting, we have a different spread. And he would show up to these forums. And I would pull him aside at the end and I would ask him questions, and we would have really good conversations. Now, did we, agree on the outcomes of those conversations? Did he ever vote for anything that I agreed with? Well, sometimes, but not on super contentious issues. But he was here. He would show up. Things have changed. The excuse when we went online of Republicans not showing up to online forums has now continued. We're back in person. We've been back in person for now a full year in forums and events, and we're still not seeing the folks who represent this town show up to hear from their citizens. And I think that's incredibly wrong, and I think that needs to be said over and over and over. I don't think it's redundant for us to each present that we see how wrong this is. While we are going everywhere we can to hear from folks who might have a different perspective from us, to hear from folks who can teach us about how these pieces of legislation are going to impact them, others are avoiding the conversations to the best of their ability. And I think that's wrong. I also think it's wrong that we're spending so much of our legislative session on things that are not meeting the needs of what Iowans say they want, right? We all want clean water. We all want to be able to go through our day not having to worry about the cleanup at Marengo and how that's being handled. We want to know that's being responsibly handled. Thankfully, we have good journalists in the area who give us information about these things, but the legislature is not responding. And that's something that we need to be speaking up about, and we need to be noting every time we spend time disenfranchising voters, every time we spend time messing with county supervisors, every time we spend time hating on kids, when we could be spending time making sure that this is a safe and welcoming place to live and grow. Thank you so much for being here. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. And Representative Zabner.
Thank you all so much for being here. So we're here in Hills in House District 92, and I would bet, and I might try it on a nicer day, that if you stand out there on the street and you ask the first 10 people that walk by what's the most important thing for this community, they would say Hills Elementary, which is part of Iowa City Community Schools. So it's not just these forums that we've never seen Heather Hora at. We've never seen her at the monthly Iowa City Community Schools Forum. She has no interest in going there and making sure that Hills Elementary, which is the smallest school in the district, which has seen numbers declining, is protected. You know, she voted for $1 billion over 4 years for some of the most well-off people in this state to send their kids to private school, and she's not willing to stand up for Hills Elementary, which is the cornerstone of this community. So I don't know, maybe there was a Dowling Catholic Booster Club meeting this week, and that's why she's not here, but that's an embarrassment. You know, and it goes to a theme of not listening. A couple weeks ago, we debated the governor's power grab bill, 1,600 pages. Representative Nielsen and I spent a lot of time being probably the only people in the room who read the thing. And one of the things it did is it took the Department for the Blind and it took away its independence, which was previously controlled by a commission that included 2 blind people, 1 sighted person, moved all that power into the governor's office. Hundreds of blind people reached out to us. They showed up at the Capitol. They spoke. They called. They emailed. And, you know, this bill was written by a consultant, and I had the opportunity on the floor to ask Representative Jane Bloomingdale, who was running the bill, how were blind people consulted? How were they engaged in the writing of this legislation that so changes one of the best departments for the blind in the country? And her answer was, I don't know. So what I want to tell you all is I don't know is not good enough when you're talking about how you engage your constituents. I'm busy is not good enough when there's a forum in your town for people to come here and ask you questions. And so in 2 years, we better have a different representative in House District 92 because Heather Hora just isn't cutting it.
Thank you all. It has been a tough time to be an Iowan. So it's hard enough for us. I don't know if people are aware, there was a front page article in the Washington Post about Iowa's sharp turn to the right. We've become known as the Florida of the North without the beaches. And frankly, we do have some beaches. They've just been trashed by terrible environmental legislation.
Can I make one comment about that article briefly? So I will say, so I read that article, and the woman who wrote that is named Annie, and I spoke with Annie for that article. She didn't include any quotes from a lot of people she spoke with, and she completely glossed over facts that went against her narrative. So I'm a subscriber to the Washington Post. I didn't cancel my subscription. But the idea that there's a joke among the State House Press Corps about Iowa being the Florida of the North, I talk to the State House Press Corps every single day. That is not a joke among the State House Press Corps. So I don't know where she got that from or anything like that. I talk to the State House Press literally every day. Literally never heard any of them make that joke. So for whatever it's worth, there were some things in that article that were correct, but the overarching narrative was, I think, maybe a little oversold. Not unlike a Florida timeshare.
Well, thank you for doing all that you're doing to hold it off. So I think we should give them a round of applause for. Thank goodness for you. And again, thank you for coming. So now we're going to start with questions, and we'll start with one from the league, and then we'll turn to you in the audience. The EPA recently released its revised definition to the waters of the U.S., WOTUS. Iowa's Attorney General has joined in a multi-state lawsuit against this new rule. Do you support the newly framed definition of navigable waters, or is there a need for this definition to be revised? And each of you can weigh in on this if you would like. Anybody want to tackle that?
So I haven't had the chance to review the new WOTUS rule closely. And generally speaking, obviously, one of the reasons it's important to have a national framework for water is because water flows among the states. And so what happens in Iowa affects what happens in Missouri, what happens in Arkansas, what happens in Mississippi, what happens in the Gulf of Mexico. So I haven't had the chance to review that just yet, but I understand the previous WOTUS rules caused some heartburn among some farmers because there was concern about what the federal government would do. But I think the reason that concern existed was because there was an understanding that we weren't doing enough here in the state of Iowa, which I think probably all of us agree on. at a high level regarding the Attorney General's decision to sign on to a lawsuit, I think it just underscores the point that Brenna Bird is more interested in partisan lawsuits than serving as the Attorney General for the people of Iowa.
Yes. Anyone else?
I have not read the new WOTUS regs. My understanding was that the old ones really did not have a great impact on agriculture. However, as someone who's interested in us actually having clean water and drinkable water and swimmable water and water in which we can recreate and kayak without worrying what happens if we fall into it, as well as clean wells, I'm generally in favor of these national standards, but again, have not read the regs carefully.
Okay, thank you. So now turning to you in the audience, we request that your questions be about a minute long so that everybody has a chance to come forward. And legislators, limit your responses to 2 minutes if you can. So let's take the first question.
Is it check 1, 2? Check 1, 2.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're good,
we can
Mike.
hear you.
We can hear you.
Good morning. It's nice to see you here. I'm Mike Carberry with the Iowa City Area Group of the Sierra Club. I saw something online and I wanted to read this. Say you're in a room with 400 people. 36 don't have health insurance. 48 live in poverty. 85 are illiterate. 90 have untreated mental illness. And every day at least one person is shot. And none of them have clean water or safe drinking water. But 2 are trans. So you decide ruining their lives is a priority. That's what's happening right now in Des Moines. And I want to thank you all for standing up and fighting for that. And I couldn't be prouder of everybody sitting up there for how hard that you have been fighting this year. I've had that cough, started about 12 years ago. We elected Terry Branstad, and it's gotten a lot worse, especially this year. So, speaking of water and clean stuff, we need clean electricity. Sierra Club was very concerned about the 1,600-page bill, which gutted the power of the Office of Consumer Advocate. They are the ones that stand up for us, rate hearings and everything else against our power companies, and we need that power against monopolies. What can we do now that that bill has passed and the governor has signed it? Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that question, and thank you for your words. There's obviously a lot of things Iowans want us to work on, and bullying trans people should not be, the #1 priority in the State House or on the list. In terms of the reorganization bill, did you run that amendment? We had, Representative Nielsen ran an amendment getting rid of the changes to the consumer advocate. They didn't take it. I was really disappointed because an independent consumer advocate is such an important part of that role. If they're part of the AG's office and appointed by the AG, then it's very difficult for them to be independent when they're appointed by someone who's getting campaign contributions from all these, big utilities. There's also been a theme generally in the State House of deregulating utilities. One piece of really good news this week was the decision from the Iowa Supreme Court going back to that 2020 law and saying that, no, you can't make utilities completely insulated from competition. And if you want to laugh, which I just heard from Senator Wahls, go in there and read.
Page 10.
Yeah, read some of the analysis of Senator Bisignano's questions and the underwhelming response from the Republican running that bill.
Yeah, if I can just building on that. Sorry, I'm sorry I couldn't contain the chuckle. It's not a cough for me. It kind of manifests a little higher in the throat. So I understand that obviously we're in the minority, and so we're not winning very many votes. But one of the things that we are able to do during debate is, as we heard earlier, engage our Republican colleagues to ask questions about the legislation that they're running. And oftentimes, the lines of questioning that we're pursuing may seem a little confusing to the public, like, why are you asking those questions? What's going on here? Oftentimes, what's happening is that we're trying to lay the groundwork so that if there is litigation down the line, that people who are reviewing these laws, i.e. judges, are able to go back and watch the legislative debate and use that as a basis for them making their decisions, which are, again, going back to Schoolhouse Rock, interpreting the laws, right? And what Representative Zabner is referring to is some back and forth that happened late at night. I mean, this was like almost 1 in the morning on this provision that was tucked into the very last bill that we are debating that was ultimately ruled unconstitutional. And so even though you sometimes might wonder, like, what exactly are the Democrats doing every day up at the State House? A big part of what we're doing is engaging in these debates that become the basis for, like what just happened yesterday with the Supreme Court overturning a really, big deal piece of law. So that's a big part of it. And if you just want some fun late night reading, I would highly recommend starting on page 9, page 10. Senator Bolcom has a brief appearance. If you missed Joe, so it was a good decision to read.
We have a very specialized definition of fun.
Got to take the wins where you can get them.
That's very true. Very true. We actually thought that the 1,600-page bill was fun, so we're weird. Mike,
Yeah, why?
I know.
We got it.
I know, Dave.
I'm kidding. You did a lot of work on that.
I know, that was fine. I wish I could tell you what you should do next and how we're going to, keep protecting the people of Iowa from, bad utility decisions. But I can't, and unfortunately, neither can the Republicans, and especially the governor, because they don't know what they did. Representative Zabner is correct. We were probably 2 of maybe 10 people in the House that read that bill, and that read it enough and understood it enough to know the terrible things that it is going to do to Iowans. I think that bill touches every single person in the state in some way negatively. If it's not from the Department of the Blind, the taking away the autonomy of the OCA, vocational rehab, and honestly, just the phrase "at the pleasure of the governor" is detrimental to our state. Nobody is going to be safe to answer questions honestly, give opinions. It's already pretty bad up there. We don't get honest answers from department heads, if we even get answers as Democrats. I don't know about the Senate, but we don't often get answers to our questions. I'm sorry, I'm probably going to go over 2 minutes. And that's because of the governor and the control that she wields up there. People are scared to death of her. It is disgusting. Oh, good, I have a whole nother minute.
I cede my time to Representative Nielsen.
Oh, it's 3? Okay, awesome. It is absolutely disgusting. She's proven that she has no problem being retaliatory towards people who maybe don't share her opinion. Representative Zabner many times on that reorg bill asked, what's going to stop the governor from firing this person, this appointee, if they don't agree with her politically? And the answer was always, well, nothing. Duh. It was like, nothing, duh. and we all looked at each other like, well, that's not good. Don't we want people here? You don't need to be surrounded by a bunch of yes people. You need people to push back. You need people to ask questions. And that's what we do. We ask the questions. So that was a little bit of a long-winded, meandering kind of answer. But that bill is just crap. We call it the crap bill. It's an acronym. It means, what was it, Adam? It was consolidation, reorganization, and power grab bill, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I actually ran an amendment in committee that said that the governor couldn't fire people who serve at her pleasure for speaking against one of her bills or one of her legislative priorities, and every single Republican on the committee voted against that. So when you see things like Senate File 516, which would stop the DNR, Department of Natural Resources, from being able to buy any new lands, and you see that the Department of the Natural Resources is registered undecided on that bill, it's because there's an understanding among everyone in that Capitol that the governor will retaliate if you speak out against even one of her proposals.
Well, yeah, that, and then also, sorry, one more thing that you reminded me of. We had the anti-ESG bill a couple of weeks ago, and the director of IPERS came out and talked about how important it was that we, stop this woke agenda of investing in different companies that might be boycotting, companies that don't have a high ESG score, which is environment, social, and then governance. So, putting our money where our, or putting our mouths where our money are, I guess is more the way that it goes. If I want to make sure that I'm investing in good corporate citizen, ship, I should be able to do that. And the bill said, oh no, we don't want you to be able to go by your standards. We want you to have to go by ours, which means you have to invest in things like, firearms, timber, oil, all the things that aren't necessarily great and sustainable for our environment. And for the director of IPERS to come out and say, oh yes, that's a good idea. We should definitely make sure that we're not allowing people, state funds to be invested in this way.
In a way that makes money.
Yeah.
You didn't mention the other amendment that you ran.
Which one?
Oh, yeah. So there was one that would have changed the signs when you drive into the state and the state motto to "We serve at the pleasure of the governor."
We make our own fun.
Can I, one brief point on the serving at the pleasure of the governor, by the way. This is already starting to happen. The governor has canned the director for the Department of Education, Ann Lebo, and replaced her with a guy whose whole career has been working for conservative right-wing think tanks specializing on private school voucher programs. That's his whole career. He's already, allegedly, I guess I don't have this for sure, but we have heard that he has already met with Moms for Liberty, but he has actually not yet reached out to the body that has to confirm his appointment, the Iowa Senate. So in case you're wondering what the practical consequences of serving at the pleasure of the governor looks like, that's it. She got shuffled over to HHS. I mean, that's called managing a problem and avoiding a lawsuit is what happened there.
I would like to, real quick, address the question with one suggestion, which is we are going to have to look out for each other going forward. And what that means to me is that if you know anyone or hear from anyone or hear about anyone who is being negatively impacted by some of these changes, we need to be helping them to learn how to write a letter to the editor. We need to be learning how to connect them with reporters. We need to be learning how to help them to advocate so that we are building a network helping each other to advocate, because it's not going to come from the state anymore, at least for the time being.
Yeah. And I would add to that one of the other things that has to happen, almost in direct answer to you, is people need to document. Mm-hmm. We pursue some of these lines of questioning on the floor to preserve a record of legislative intent, so that eventually some of these bills can be taken to court and they will lose. No matter how conservative the court are, there are a lot of illegal, unconstitutional bills that are being pushed forward. So people, in addition to us supporting them and figuring out how to support them, we need to have things documented so that eventually they can be taken to court.
Okay.
Very informative. Thank you. Next question.
Hi, I'm Mary McCarthy, Horaville, and I could talk about a lot of things, but first of all, I just want to focus on what you said about asking questions. So a little quote, I'll just pass on to you, and I want you to put it on a Post-it note. inquiry is a sign of a great mind and a great thinker and a great ruler. So keep asking questions. And I agree with Amy that if we didn't have journalists in Iowa, we would know nothing. So I would like to just address the issue of the ALEC takeover of our state. And that's where there is no creative legislation coming in anymore. It's all from ALEC or the Koch brothers or Heritage. So this is what's scary. And I think people just need to be better aware of that and that stream. So, but my bottom line question is, I'm a nurse, and the Trump administration did away with infection control, monitoring, and requirements in care centers with Medicare. That was prior to COVID. Look what happened to our care centers with COVID. Our state did nothing to help. And what's happening in care centers is despicable. You have people who live in Humboldt, Iowa, all their life. They go to the Humboldt Care Center. That has been closed. The fines that are levied are pittance. They have done away with the ombudsman. You probably know this a little bit better. I had 6 years of life as a family member with people in a care center, plus 40 years of being a nurse. I kind of know a few things. But what has happened is just total degradation. So growing old in Iowa, and we have a lot of old people. I'm in my 60s now, so I think about this because my expiration date is probably approaching. But being in a care center right now is not safe in Iowa. Our governor doesn't even respond to me anymore. I actually happened to send a copy of my college degree to her because during her campaign she didn't realize that nurses had to go to college and be educated. But so she doesn't respond to me anymore, which is okay. But this is what bothers me. What has happened with care center review, if we didn't have Clark Kaufman in our state, we would know nothing. So I will end on that. Thank you so much.
Mary, first of all, just so you know, Republicans are currently trying to destroy newspapers in Iowa. I don't have the bill number handy. One of you might have it. But essentially, they're trying to do away with one of the last guaranteed. 546. Thank you, 546. Is that a House file? So basically, they're trying to do away with publishing legal notices in newspapers. Now, look, we live in the internet age. It would be great if we could just publish all of our notices online at no cost to the publishing institutions. But the reality is there's still a lot of communities across the state that depend on getting their information in their weekly paper printed on paper, right? And if you, and by the way, there's really good political science research on this. If you, in places where newspapers have gone down or gone away, there is more corruption. It is that simple. Like, it is a very direct and clear correlation. And so, again, it's no secret about what's going on here. Republicans don't want oversight. They don't want to show up and be held publicly accountable. They just want to, do their thing and pass whatever law gets sent to them by ALEC. So just want to make sure that's on your radar. It has not passed yet, I don't think, and we're hoping that we're able to stop that because that's a big one. Clark Kaufman, by the way, for the Iowa Capitol Dispatch, is a treasure. And I think that, that's probably the good news about the Capitol Dispatch is they don't depend on those, so he's going to be okay. But the Capitol Dispatch also sends their reporting to weekly papers across the state at either little or very, very low cost to those weekly papers. And so it's one of the best things that has happened to Iowa journalism in the last few years is the development of the Iowa Capitol Dispatch and the watchdog that they're able to do.
And I only hope the Fort Dodge Messenger and other papers start picking up those articles. Yeah. It's good to see you again, Mary. Thanks for driving to Hills. You probably drove right by someone's church who isn't here today. So Representative Sherman actually has a church in Coralville, so he's familiar with the drive. And you saw what happened at the university as far as the university hospitals as far as the use of face masks. Make absolutely no mistake, that came from the governor's office. That's where it came from.
Yeah, I'll just note, we have a fair number of legislators, including Representative Sherman, who are living in a fantasy land. I mean, there was a bill this week, 2 weeks ago, about pharmacy, changing some of the rules around pharmacists.
Don't say
And
ivermectin.
yeah, Brad Sherman got up to represent, you know, the caucus of people who are very concerned about ivermectin being prescribed and
About
not
it
to
being
dogs.
prescribed.
About
it not being
yeah.
prescribed.
So, I mean, it's just ridiculous. And, you know, part of this consolidation power grab bill that we keep talking about was a dismantling of the State Board of Health, which was a really important part of keeping us safe and having public health experts in charge of this stuff. So we're just headed in the wrong direction.
It really does kind of give the game away that they're obsessed with trying to make this off-label drug, ivermectin, available to anybody who wants it, which has no actual research supporting its use to treat COVID symptoms. But they're really, really opposed to transgender teenagers getting access to life-saving drugs that every major accredited association of pediatricians, endocrinologists, et cetera, supports prescribing as a way to reduce the likelihood of suicidality among transgender teens experiencing gender dysphoria. I mean, it's just completely logically inconsistent. The one thing that it is, they just hate transgender people. That's it.
Right, and they ran that bill in the Senate as a, quote, public health bill, unquote.
Next question.
Good morning, folks. I think I'm perhaps in the minority because I do think that some of our legislators do need ivermectin to use their brains. Now, generally, I want to be very careful when I speak publicly to say that I'm speaking only for myself, but in this case, I think I know that I can confidently say, address you as the Johnson County Board of Supervisors. When we're looking at local control, I have a question about Senate File 34, stormwater. We're very concerned about that. Can you please let us know what's going on there? Thank you.
I now know more about stormwater than I ever really wanted to learn. I spent hours talking to experts at the county and in cities and so forth. Essentially, what passed the Senate, but I don't know where it's going in the House. Maybe you all know if it's going to be have an idea if it's going to be taken up in the House. Is a bill that is designed to protect contractors, not designed to improve water quality, not designed to assist in local control or allow communities with different characteristics, and some who are on rivers and some who are not, to be able to decide what standards they want to allow coming off of in terms of water coming off of construction sites. A more reasonable result would have been to create some sort of statewide platform or sort of even ground, if you will, and then allow communities and counties some leeway to add to that or to go that one better if they need it because of the specific characteristics of their hillsides or their runoff or their desires to prevent flooding. Because ultimately, if this bill ends up passing, what it will do is increase costs for communities and increase costs for the state and potentially for the country when there are extreme weather events and flooding, which we all know are increasing.
John, just so you know, that has now been renumbered Senate File 455. Correct. It is in the House, and Representative Art Stade is the Democrat on the legislation, so I would encourage you to reach out to him.
There was a very well-attended House subcommittee meeting on Thursday. I was not able to be present, but I heard about it from some of our companions. It's fascinating to me how many of these bills I hear about that are in so many different committees, and then I pull them up and go, oh, this is an anti-local control bill. Just over and over this session, I would say 65% of legislation that people reach out to me, I open them up and go, oh, it's anti-local control. And this is another one of those where it's not taking into consideration the fact that local folks who have the best interests of their communities in mind are the best suited to make these decisions.
the one thing I would add is that the senator who ran it is from Beckendorf, does construction himself, was on city council there, and that's the supervisor.
The real question I have is the fix in for the CO2 pipeline, I mean, is that thing gonna go through? Because the governor more or less said, well, we can't stop it now, they've invested too much money. So my question is, the eminent domain bill, House File 565, clears the House. What is the chances of forcing eminent domain for private gain out of the question? In a second. Thank you very much.
The odds of that bill passing the Iowa Senate are 0. Jack Whitfer who's the Republican majority leader, has made crystal clear he is not going to move that bill forward. And that is that. Now, his caucus, if they were so inclined, could create or sign what's called a discharge petition, which would allow them to essentially overrule their leader. That will not happen because they're all terrified about losing whatever authority they have, so none of them are willing to sign it. 'Cause it's a public document, basically. So there are a bunch of Republican senators who will tell you that they care about this, but when the chips are down, none of them are actually willing to challenge the Republican Senate majority leader, who has said that bill is not going to advance. And apparently the governor is telling people that even if it did get out of the Senate, she would veto it. So at this point, I would say it's going to happen. Now, I would tell you, keep up the pressure on the Republican senators, because they're the ones who have the ability to sign that petition and get it out of their caucus. But at this point, Jack Whitfer has made crystal clear that he's drawn a line in the sand. Now, the one maybe kind of wild card here is that near the end of session, there are always negotiations between the House leadership and the Senate leadership over what the final kind of agreement is to end the session. If Pat Grassley decides that he wants to actually flex a little bit, he could say that they're not going to gavel out until this gets signed into law. I wouldn't hold your breath. I mean, typically speaking, the House Republican leadership gets taken to the cleaners by the Senate Republican leadership. That's why the vouchers bill is law, and a lot of these other bills that have been going for years in the Senate are now finally law. But if Grassley decides he wants to hold the line, that could be a part of the negotiations. I would not hold your breath. I don't think it's going to happen. Whitfer has basically said this is a done deal. So the real question will be what you wind up seeing after the dust settles at the end of the session. It's going to be interesting to watch, but unfortunately, I don't think at this point Whitfer's mind is going to change.
We've all gotten, I presume, plenty of emails about this, and my response is talk to Republican leadership, and I believe that eminent domain is for public utilities. There's even one senator who has authored several bills that would limit eminent domain, and his name is Jeff Taylor. He's from Dordt. He teaches at Dordt College, but I have not seen any willingness there for him to push leadership.
This one, this one's been really interesting for me because this was something that I was pretty engaged with prior to the election, and have continued to be engaged with. And I gotta admit, this vote that we took on, was it Wednesday or Thursday? Wednesday. We didn't vote on Thursday. Wednesday morning. It was rough for me because I voted yes, because I do want to see something happen that will actually stop the pipelines or impede the pipelines or stop the harassment that's happening to landowners, or God, there's so many reasons to hate these projects. But I don't actually believe this bill is going to do that. What I believe this bill is a campaign ad. This bill is a way for folks in the House who have gotten a lot of pressure from amazing people like yourselves showing up at forums and events to be able to say, well, I did my part. I passed along a bill to protect your property rights, to protect your land, to protect us from this. The truth is that there are so many reasons why I don't believe, even if this bill became a law, it specifies a liquid carbon pipeline. Well, we've heard expert information and expert testimony in the Environmental Protection Committee that the argument can be made that what is going through these pipelines is not a liquid, it is in a state between liquid and gas. And so even if this bill becomes a law, which I don't expect it to do, the pipeline companies would still be able to make the argument that it doesn't apply to what they're doing. So what I would say to you is that we need to keep putting pressure on the IUB, despite the fact that they're having the rug pulled out from under them a bit with the reorg bill. We need to keep putting pressure on the governor's office. We need to keep putting pressure on those representatives and senators to say, we're not gonna just take your word for it that you did something for us unless something actually happens, unless something actually changes and protects people from what's happening.
It's interesting, you said they show up at forums? Oh, good. But it's interesting, in the span of 24 hours, we were debating a bill on eminent domain, property rights. And then 24 hours later, there's a subcommittee on Senate File 516 about property rights and not allowing property owners to deed their land for conservation. Within a span of 24 hours, we had two versions of property rights. So that's the kind of thing every day that you deal with at the Capitol.
One of the first things that someone told me after I got elected was, do not expect logic to play a role.
Or principle. I mean, like, not to belabor the point, but there's no underlying through line of any of this. It's just politics. It is just politics all the way down.
Next question.
But I want you to know, we enjoy our jobs. We really do, and we're fighting for you.
We have fun.
Hello. Does this work?
Yeah.
Yep. My name is Gene Shumkovic. I'm a veterinarian in West Branch, Iowa. All this talk of ivermectin on my day off has got me a little unnerved. It is a really safe drug. But, like, for instance, if I give a non-heartworm treatment to a sensitive collie, say for Demodex mites, it will die. And I will get in a shitload of trouble. All right? So, first off, my wife brought me here today so I could yell at Republicans, but they don't seem to be any of them here. But I'm still going to yell, but it's not at you, okay? So, and my main concern is the environmental issues. My wife and I, about how many years ago? Did we buy that land? 20 years ago, we bought a parcel of land in Cedar County to restore to oak savanna and tall grass prairie. We thought what we were taking on was a battle with garlic mustard, multiflora rose, and honeysuckle, and learning how to burn and restore it to native prairie. What we found, our main obstacle is agriculture. From herbicide drift to tiling and runoff into our stream, to the fence laws, which are absolutely bizarre, where I have to put up a fence and then the neighbor doesn't feed the cattle and it knocks my fence down and then he complains to me. And learning that we really have no power against agriculture in this state. And that, I went to Iowa State for vet school. I got to meet Wendy Winterstein, who was the dean of the School of Agriculture at that point. I went to a meeting at the State House to try to get funding for our diagnostics lab and our large animal center. And was told by her at one of the subcommittee meetings she sat in on, where she was trying to stop a bill in California for hen-laying chickens, just said that those dumb assholes, she said this, quote, on the East Coast don't know where their food comes from. And a chicken doesn't need to spread its wings. Ha ha ha, yucking it up with everybody. She's now president of Iowa State, okay? So what I'm asking you guys to do here is one of our biggest supporters for agriculture, and it affects the votes for Republicans in this state, is something called America Needs Farmers, which at the University of Iowa is solely sponsored by the Iowa Farm Bureau. And all of that budgeting comes, and all the rules comes from the athletic department with no oversight from the University of Iowa whatsoever. I cannot find out how much money the Farm Bureau pays. They will not tell us. They say it's locked up with Learfield Sports. This isn't just Iowa, it happens across all the Big Ten. It's an awful thing. They get to advertise to millions of people every game day, and they all vote Republican, okay? So I'm asking you to do something about, just start, help me find how much they get from the Farm Bureau. And then, Zach, read the comments in that Washington Post. The article sucked, but the comments are telling about what people think of Iowa, what's going on here. And then the last thing is that as a veterinarian, I have wonderful, wonderful trans, gay, lesbian clients. And getting back to water quality, lesbian clients of mine, I only know the names of their dogs and cats. I'm just terrible that way. But they're restoring, here's a little anecdote. They're restoring land. They started this before I did, and I went to them for help, and it's down like south of Osceola. And all this time, they said they got along with the neighbors fine, everything was great, but they say that now people are emboldened to attack them at the coffee shops and call them out, and that's wrong. But that's what's happening in this state. And the reason there's no Republicans here is because if they came here, it would be less likely that they get reelected rather than more likely. So by not coming here, they are guaranteeing that they're getting reelected. It is not to their benefit. Okay? And I'm not yelling at you guys. I'm just yelling because I'm pissed off.
Okay, get it out.
Well, sir, what was your name one more time? Greg? Dave? Gene. I'll give you a business card afterward. I used to represent West Branch. I don't anymore, much to my chagrin. I really enjoyed representing Cedar County. But I think we can agree, America does need lesbian farmers. I appreciate that. And by the way, so I'm happy to chat with some of our friends at the university, see if they'll tell me. And if they won't, I'll ask our auditor to ask. But that is exactly the kind of question that Republicans don't want our auditor to be able to ask, right? That's like their whole thing. And then at a high level also, I mean, we have I don't know how many folks who live in town know this, we have an acute shortage of veterinarians in this state. And so I'm just grateful for what you do. I don't know how much longer you plan to intend to continue practicing, but well, there you go. I mean, so, and by the way, when we talk about the effect that this culture war agenda is having on everyday Iowans, that is exactly what we're talking about. It's not just alienating teachers, it is alienating every Iowan who has a friend, family member, or colleague who identifies as LGBTQ, who no longer feels safe. I haven't read the comments on the article. As a general rule, I try to avoid doing that. But I can 100% imagine, I bet, with a high level of accuracy, what they're like.
A lot of Iowans who have left.
I believe it, 100%. So appreciate the comments and share a lot of the rage, no doubt about it.
I'd like to add one thing that's related to what you said, Zach, is people have talked about the reorg bill, they've talked about a variety of other things, and the auditor bill. One thing that a lot of folks aren't thinking about is the federal funds that we're putting at risk with some of this legislation. Federal funds that are being put at risk with the reorg bill, federal funds that are being put at risk by not allowing clean audits of various programs that have federal funds and where they need to be, where the auditor's office needs to be able to ensure, for example, that those getting student loans are actually making progress. So there's a whole variety. Couldn't give you a dollar amount, but there are various different bills, including those that target trans folks because of Title VII and others, that are definitely putting funding at risk in this state.
So I'm the ranking Democrat on the House Natural Resources Committee, and we have some of these conversations about conservation, about water quality. We had the opportunity to have the Des Moines Waterworks come in and present and show us data that over the 10 years of our voluntary nutrient reduction strategy here in Iowa, nitrate levels have continued to increase. And the really frustrating thing to me is there is an unwillingness to even admit that there's a problem. Every time we talk about the nutrient reduction strategy on that committee, and all I say is, nutrients are still increasing. You should see the look on Representative Hora's face. It's like I dropped one of Dave Jacoby's words.
It's
But,
like you're personally killing one of her
but,
fans every time you
I think there's a push and pull on these issues, and I understand that. I mean, once we admit that there's a water quality problem, there's a conversation to be had about what are the measures that need to go into place, which ones are too restrictive on industry, which ones are in that happy medium where they're going to have the impact we want to have, and also allow people to continue their work. But if you're not willing to admit there's a problem, then it's impossible to solve the problem. And if you're not willing to listen to the folks in your community who are experiencing that problem, then, that's not even really democracy. Right.
Thank you for,
And I really appreciate your comments. By the way, I think you graduated from vet school with one of my dumb brothers. So, yeah, with my brother Danny. So we'll talk afterwards. So, yeah.
Can I,
thank
one
you.
more just quick follow-up on that. What you're describing is fear. Right. Right. Correct. So fear has really taken root in Des Moines. There's a huge amount of fear within the Republican Party of criticizing the governor, and part of that comes from the fact that the governor chose to work closely with out-of-state special interest groups from Washington, D.C. to primary almost a dozen incumbent sitting Republican lawmakers in her party because they disagreed with her on vouchers, private school vouchers. They know it's going to be bad for the communities. They had the courage to speak up. The governor went in, took out a majority of those people, and now there's a lot of fear among Romanian people to criticize her. There's fear within the executive branch to voice disagreement with the governor's office when they have a certain viewpoint that they want to advance. There's fear from Republican legislators of showing up to forums like this. It takes courage to come to a public forum like you all are doing and to express discontent. So I want to thank you for having the courage to be here, and it may not feel very courageous, you're just angry, and I think a lot of us are feeling that. But it's really important to continue to do things like this. It takes courage for the league to have the willingness to host things like this, knowing that people in power disagree with this event even happening, which is part of why they're not showing up. And so I want to name that, because the other thing that is happening right now is people in the business community know that what your colleagues who are experiencing when it comes to leaving the state because of the anti-LGBTQ legislation, they're afraid to speak up. Kyle Krause, who is not a person I agree with on a lot of policy, he's the CEO of the organization that owns Come and Go, spoke out recently against some of this anti-LGBTQ legislation. Kyle worked closely with his lead on diversity, equity, and inclusion work to try and put together a list of CEOs across the state who could speak out against these bills. After weeks of trying to do this, they got a grand total of 2 signatures, Kyle Krause and actually a local CEO here in Johnson County. But that was it. And the reason that was it is because there is an enormous amount of fear in the business community that if they exercise their First Amendment, God-given and constitutionally protected right to free speech, the governor will retaliate against their business. Think about how sick and twisted that is the level of fear that currently exists in this state. So, again, it may not seem courageous to all of you for taking the time out of your Saturday morning to be here, but in a place in a state now where fear is the reigning emotion, it does take courage to show up and be here. So I just want to take a moment to say thank you to all of you for expressing your viewpoints this morning and for being here in this group.
thank you, very, very sobering. Thank you for those comments, because we do have a number of people that appear to have questions. If we can direct our passion very succinctly to allow it. Thank you, everyone, for their comments. So try to keep to a minute and try to keep to 2 minutes.
Okay, I'll do this in a quick minute. I want to say that my wife Joan and I set an example for Republicans this morning. We drove all the way down from Iowa City to come here. I wanted to comment about the press and what can be done. I've done a little research lately about newspapers in Iowa, and I had no idea there are 274 newspapers in the state of Iowa. 32 dailies, the rest are all weekly newspapers that are published in small towns. Average readership is around 1,000 people, and these are all run by 1 or 2 people trying to hang together and keep it going. What's the most popular thing people read in their local newspaper?
High school
Sports, okay. Local sports, that's what keeps the local newspapers going. Obituaries, letters to the editor. Okay, so if you want to reach the small communities with 1,000 people here and 1,000 people there, write a letter to the editor for these small newspapers, and they'll publish them. I've had letters published in DeWitt and Clinton and West Branch and Tiffin, and the local editors just love to have something to put in their papers to keep them alive. So there's a group called progressiowa.org, and every Monday they have a statewide Zoom call about people who are interested in writing letters to the editor. So I'd really encourage you to do it. I mean, just the issues we've been talking about right here, express your opinion, and I can almost guarantee that the local editors of these small town newspapers, who are the people we're really trying to reach, not the people here, they'll listen. They'll be happy to read your information, and I really would really encourage you to do that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, Tom, I would just underscore that point. When I represented Cedar County, I subscribed to the Tipton Conservative, the West Branch Times, the Durant-Wilton Advocate. North Cedar had the Sun News Press, and just reading those every week. And I'm still subscribed, so they still show up at my house. Just a great way to see what's kind of going on. Now, not all the editors are there's this stereotype out there that all people in the press are liberal. Read any of these weekly papers, and you'll see very quickly that's not true. My friend Greg, who runs the West Branch Times, is definitely not a liberal Democrat, but he publishes letters, and so I would just echo that even though a lot of these small town papers have a viewpoint that is not necessarily progressive, there is a general willingness to publish letters because, to your point, that's what drives readership. Yep. And just make sure that as you're writing your letter, you're thinking about your audience.
Next question.
Hello, everyone. Shannon Patrick, Iowa City. There are so many questions I could ask. I'm going to try and limit those.
And we don't have to ask you to write letters. You're very good at your editorials.
Well, thank you. Because it works much better when it's on. I will throw out the quick thought, though, that even though in the past, coastal consulting firms have been much denigrated, we just redesigned our whole state government based on
That's right. That's right.
So, they must be really popular right now.
With a big ESG report on their website, by the way.
Yeah. Ooh, very nice. Well, the one that I'm going to limit myself to grudgingly is that I'm aware that in the last week, Iowa became the 6th state to pass a consumer data protection law. I work in data management. I have heard very little about this. I'm curious and interested to hear what you all think of this, for the good or bad, for the bill that passed. Basically, I know it was similar to Utah's, it's a nonprofit carve-out. Haven't heard much else. Haven't seen really anything on it in the press.
So I was on committee for it in the Senate. I guess I would characterize it as better than nothing right now, and a floor, because it's essentially designed for yesterday, but we had nothing until now. And I don't think it goes into effect until something like 2025. But, and
That's a Freudian slip when you said 1925. Right there. We are behind.
But it didn't seem to be particularly bad. It just sort of seems to create a floor from which we can work going forward.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Holly Hart, and I live in Iowa City. and I don't know how relevant this question is to environmental issues, although it will tangentially be. The Electronic Registration Information Center, or ERIC, is a nonprofit organization assisting states to improve accuracy of voter rolls and access to voter registration. Iowa was one of 2 states, I can't recall the other one, but 2 that recently decided to pull out of that organization. And apparently, our Secretary of State, Paul Pate, who has struck me as one of the more reasonable Republicans, apparently supports that. I'm wondering if anyone can comment on that. I assume that the governor cannot fire the Secretary of State, am I correct?
Correct.
Correct.
No, if she could, she would have 2 years ago. But, yeah, well, you summarize, it's actually more of a statement than a question. The proposal is for us to withdraw from the system. And again, that's what I mentioned earlier in opening comments, because anything with the system also encourages people to vote. So, and as far as voter fraud, I think most of us know where the voter fraud is coming from. So there's very little voter fraud in Iowa. I think Johnson County is run by an amazing auditor, but I'll bring up Scott County. Scott County had a recount this year, and they recounted 3, if not 4 times, and none of the individual times were the numbers even close. So that system that we're talking about, getting rid of purging voters or encouraging people to get their registration and ready to vote, I'm a little worried right now that we have 1, if not 6 counties in the state of Iowa where I suspect that they're not totally honest in the auditor's office.
I was just curious, I was just curious if you thought that had to do with the ERIC system, or why you think Paul Pate supported moving away from that.
I think Paul Pate is feeling some pressure.
Okay.
That's honestly what I believe.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Heather Dole, and I'm from Lone Tree. My son goes to Northwest Junior High School. There was a bomb threat on Thursday, which was brought on by right-wing extremism from our state and the country as a whole. I would just like to know what can be done in the House or Senate to stop this rhetoric from bringing right-wing extremism, terroristic threats to my children's schools.
Heather, thank you for raising this subject. I went to Northwest Junior High School. Dave and I both live around the corner from Northwest. Janice, did you go to Northwest?
I was in the class that opened it.
So we're just so folks know. So there's this Twitter account called Libs of TikTok, which is operated by an ultra right-wing extremist woman who lives in New York State, and she highlights on this Twitter account examples of LGBTQ inclusion. Now she cherry picks sometimes extreme examples where people might say, that's maybe not quite right. But the upshot of this is that the people who follow this person on Twitter use a variety of techniques that you could accurately describe as domestic terrorism, stochastic direct domestic terrorism. They call in bomb threats. They call in or report active shooters, which are not true. They falsely report active shooters to send in like SWAT teams, which is why the technique is literally called swatting. And they disrupt, and they've basically said they're going to continue to call in bomb threats to Northwest Junior High until they remove a certain book from the library. That, again, going back to the comment about fear, this is the weaponization of fear to enforce a social agenda on the rest of us, right? Now, this was brought to my attention yesterday afternoon when it became clear there was a trend, because this happened on Thursday as well. So when we go back to Des Moines on Monday, I'm planning to reach out to the Commissioner for Public Safety and ask him what is his office, the department, DCI, what are they doing to stop this behavior, identify the perpetrators, and bring them to justice? Because our kids need to be able to learn. And then I fully intend to make clear to my Republican colleagues that their rhetoric is responsible for this activity, because that is exactly what's happening here. So it's incredibly disturbing. The Press Citizen, I believe, has a story on this subject, kind of laying all this out. If you want to read it, it's online. But obviously, it's just awful. So, and I'm sorry that your son had to go through that, and I hope that he's able to go back to school on Monday.
Yeah,
Thank you for being here. Thank you for making the drive. But and as Zach mentioned, we live close by Northwest Junior High. Both my daughters went to school at Northwest Junior High. I'm going to have a direct conversation with the House Majority Leader on Monday, and the conversation is going to be direct. I'm fighting for parents' rights, and it's a parent's right not to have to worry about this shit. So I will have that conversation, and we'll get contact information. I'll follow up with you. Thank you.
By the way, their other target is children's hospitals.
Yeah, and I'll just, I appreciate you bringing that up, and I'm sorry that you and your family had to go through that, and obviously thankful to the law enforcement that continues to take these threats seriously and investigate them. But, this is just unacceptable, and as Senator Wahls mentioned, this is a result of a lot of the rhetoric we're seeing. There was a Senate resolution proposed this week with 6 co-sponsors that compares the treatment of January 6th insurrectionists to Nazi Germany and concentration camps like Auschwitz. That's just really dangerous, horrifying, disgusting rhetoric. When you have Representative Steve Holt saying on the floor of the Iowa House that transgender people are just pretending to be women to attack our kids in bathrooms. This is stuff that is unfounded. It is extremely dangerous. And when you see violent things happen, it's a direct result of them fomenting these far-right ideas.
And sadly, we're seeing almost daily in the paper reports of pastors or teachers or other people who actually are in the process of being charged with molesting or grooming kids. It's not a joke, but it has nothing to do with the people that the right-wing extremist Republicans are accusing of doing that.
Again, very sobering. Next question.
Hi, I'm Ann Rhodes. I'm from Iowa City, and I don't have a question, but I have 2 points. One is I have 3 daughters. The oldest is a pediatrician. The middle daughter is a public health specialist in the care of patients with HIV. They're both highly educated, very talented, and they've left Iowa and they're not coming back. So I appreciate that you recognize the impact of this right-wing agenda on the talent pool in Iowa. The brain drain is just going to get worse, and people will not come to Iowa. The second is to tell you how enormously proud I am of you, because you are all so intelligent, so articulate, and so committed to doing what's best for Iowans. I am in awe, and I just want to tell you how much I appreciate your fight, which is uphill, difficult, painful, stressful, and I am personally very grateful. I don't see the stop sign yet, so I get to spend some of my time in Minnesota, where the Democrats ran the table in November, and it's usually causes huge cognitive dissonance to have a governor and senators that appreciate. But it is a vacation from the right-wing craziness. And again, I really appreciate the job you are doing, and I am always so impressed by the quality of our local legislators. You are all really impressive, and we are all very grateful.
Can I say one thing? Thank
Next
you.
question.
I just want to say one thing, which is that I thought it was very wise decision of Governor Reynolds to not hold a public bill signing on the 2 anti-trans bills this week, because let me tell you, there were a lot of us who would have been really eager to see the dichotomy of photos of the governor of Minnesota signing a bill to feed all the kids in the state, while the governor of Iowa signs 2 bills that hurt and hate on trans kids. The dichotomy of those just surrounding us is
stark.
The one thing I do want to make sure folks realize is that we are in a very difficult place right now. There's no doubt about it. Losing Tom Miller, losing Mike Fitzgerald, obviously Admiral Franken coming up short, and Deidre DeGier losing by as much as she did was a really tough election cycle in 2022. Obviously losing ground in the Senate and the House, being in the minority, it's really hard. Auditor Sand winning re-election by a few thousand votes was certainly a bright spot. The one thing that I think people should know about that, there was more ticket splitting in that race than literally any other statewide race in the country except for the governor's race in Vermont, which if you don't know is like this very bizarre situation out there. So, I mean, there is still a very sizable segment of the electorate that is willing to vote for Democrats if you make the right argument and you have a conversation with them. Our state party is currently in the process of being completely torn down and rebuilt from the bottom up by our new Iowa Democratic Party chairwoman, Rita Hart. We had 3 of our 4 U.S. House reps were Democrats as recently as 2020. So, Fred Hubbell was not a perfect candidate in 2018, and he came within 3 points of defeating Kim Reynolds. Think about how different our state would be if rather than losing by 3 points, he had won by 3 points right now. I mean, so the way things are is not the way things have to be, but we're not going to get to a different place until we're able to come together and really make that change happen, which is what everybody who's sitting at this table is committed to doing. But we can't do it without the support of people like you, so thank you very much, Ann. And hope that we can someday bring your daughters back.
Hi, Diane Duncan Goldsmith, Iowa City. And first I'd like to thank Representative Zabner for the comment you made during the hearing. I watched a little bit of the video, and you made a comment about what trans kids need, and I think it had something to do with clean water rather than more more hate. There are several of us who try to track legislation in the state, and we're having a very challenging time doing that because things seem to change a lot. But the one thing several things interested in, the bill about guns in prisons and schools, is that still living somewhere that I just can't find?
The parking lots.
Guns in your cars,
You
as
mean
long as your car
to
is
carry
locked.
wherever you want, that bill is still alive.
Any suggestion for the best way to track some of this hateful stuff, or is there just...
Well, part of the problem over the last 2 weeks has been the computer systems have been very erratic for the Legislative Service Agency. Now, if I was a conspiracy theorist, but it has made tracking a little more difficult. And it's just a reminder too, a lot of times when bills come out of subs or committees or between chambers, they can change numbers. So, but the tracking service still should show you that on the LSA site. If there's a bill that you're having trouble tracking that you're very, very interested in, just send any one of us an email and we'll try to track it down for you or send you an update.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So, Diane, we actually did a webinar on how, so the issues with the website not being online notwithstanding, we actually do have a very robust website that allows you to track and monitor legislation pretty effectively. Come find me afterwards for a business card. We'll send you a link to a Facebook video that we recorded on Zoom, basically showing people how to use the website and to really enable some of the features that should make it a little bit easier for you. And if anybody else wants that, I'd be happy to send a copy of that to the league if you want to distribute that, just so you can stay in touch and follow what's happening along. So,
thank you so much.
Yep,
The one other suggestion I would make is if there are particular issues that you're interested in, there are often groups that have really good legislation trackers. The league is one of them. But I would also say like One Iowa Action is really great as far as their legislative page, staying up to date and keeping things updated. Sierra Club does a great job if you're specifically looking at bills on environmental issues. So if you know if there's a particular topic and you're just feeling like, wow, there's like 18 different bills, how do I keep track of all of them? that can be one helpful step, is to find a group that's really focused on that and bookmark their legislative page.
Moms Demand Action.
Yep, Moms Demand Action.
Hi, I'm Miriam Timmer-Hackert from Coralville, and my sister was contacting me about maybe having to pick up my nephews because there was a bomb threat, which just seems a very terroristic way to try and say we don't like this particular book. So I might have to buy copies of that book and stick it in my book box just in case. But we also had an Abortion Matters talk on the history of abortion rights, and one of the professors at the University of Iowa was reading the letters written to legislators, and that just made me curious. Are the emails that we send you and the letters that we send you kept, or was that a specific case that those legislators just kept their letters?
You mean like, are they public records?
Yes.
They are not public records.
Okay. I think in this case, like maybe Minette Doder donated hers to the
Yeah,
Women's
that's probably
Archive.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, we do, I keep all the paper and email and correspondence, so I just like having it around for review. And Miriam, thank you for making the drive here. And made the
Yes.
That's correct. Yeah. So comments made in subcommittee or in a committee meeting, those are recorded in our public. Although they're not archived. So we are doing these subcommittees on Zoom. You can't go back. You can't yet anyway go back and watch those recordings online. Although there's some ongoing conversations about whether that's something that we should do, at least in the Senate. I can't speak for the House.
Yeah, but testimony
Correct.
in writing is kept and is public record.
Okay, we can take one last quick question.
Again, I'm just going to reiterate what everybody else has said. Thank you all for your hard work. We really appreciate it. My name is Pat Bowen from Iowa City, and I'm going to second what Tom was saying about letters to the editor. It is really important to get them out. Liz Lenz, who we all know worked for the Gazette, I was on a Zoom call with her about a year ago, and she said these small papers are wanting stuff to print because they're firing journalists all over, and this is free for them, for you to write them a letter. So that's one other thing. And the other thing is, Progress Iowa had Rob Sand on yesterday afternoon. I listened to him for about 15 minutes, and he recommends talking to our friends or neighbors or relatives that may be apolitical or just maybe Republican, and have them start calling and writing to their representatives, because maybe, you all hear from me all the time and you go, oh yeah, she's, you know where I'm coming from. But if they start hearing from apolitical people a little bit more, that might make a difference. I don't know. I'm just spreading Rob's word.
So I'll just share, one of my weird hobbies is I like buying stuff at auctions and antiquing, that sort of thing. And University of Iowa Surplus is a place I've gone for a long time. There's a guy that works there that I've probably been talking to for 10 years. Every time I go in, we talk a little bit about politics while I'm picking up my stuff. And this week he finally said, well, I left the Republican Party. And so these ongoing conversations are so important with the people in your lives. And it's just so different with someone, even like that, someone at the coffee shop or your neighbor who you don't maybe know super well. You're a way more trusted messenger than any of us can be. And so when you hear stuff, having those conversations, talking to people, listening to them, getting them engaged is just so important. And it may take time, but it can make a really big difference.
Speaking of letters, I think it would be great if any kid, staff, member, teacher, anybody feels the desire to write to the governor and their legislators, they should do so. They have freedom of expression. I did a point on the floor this week about Mary Beth Tinker. They don't check their freedom of expression rights at the schoolhouse door. Everybody needs to hear from the kids who are being affected by this legislation too.
Everyone, you've been awesome. I do want to let all know we have a couple of resources, this wonderful booklet here that has contact information not only for all the senators and representatives, but standing committees, and it's got the seating chart and councils and service agencies. So everything you could want to know how to contact our elected officials. And then the league has our brochure that'll tell you more about us. And democracy can work. We're hearing that over and over today. So thank you for your participation and your questions and your passion. Thank goodness we have each other as we go forward through some difficult times. And again, big round of applause for all of you who showed up to talk to.
And please make sure to wish Representative Nielsen a happy birthday on the way out.
Yes. Do any of you, I skipped over closing remarks.
You heard from us enough.
All right, well, thank you for that.
Thank you all for coming.